I heard you want a husband. My son is perfect for you." The weathered Apache woman whispered urgently to the dust-covered wanderer who had saved her life, her dark eyes gleaming with desperate gratitude beneath the dying sun. The mixed-blood drifter had arrived that morning to sneers and turned backs from the frontier townsfolk, who saw only another worthless outsider seeking handouts. They expected her gone by dawn, run out or starved out. It made no difference. But the Apache woman's son, a gentle giant who worked the town forge in silence, possessed secrets his dead father left behind. Mysterious maps and mineral samples that meant nothing to him but everything to someone with the right knowledge. The Wanderer's expertise could unlock salvation for a dying community if they don't destroy her first. Will she flee their hatred, or risk everything for people who despise her very existence? The dust cloud rose behind Temperance Blackwood as she guided her weary mare into Dry Gulch. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across weathered buildings that seemed to lean away from her approach. She pulled her worn hat lower, knowing what came next. Whispers followed her down the main street. Women clutched their shawls tighter and hurried their children inside. Men spat into the dirt and turned their backs. The general store owner watched through his window, already shaking his head before she could dismount. Mayor Cornelius Ashford emerged from his office, his vest straining against his belly. His pale eyes swept over Temperance with undisguised suspicion. "State your business, girl." Temperance kept her voice steady. "Supplies and directions to Copper Creek. I'll be gone by morning. See that you are. We don't need your kind stirring up trouble." The words hit like stones, but Temperance had heard worse. She tied her horse to the post and approached the general store. The owner stepped outside, blocking her path. "We're closed. Your sign says open." "Not to you." Behind him, Martha Glenwood appeared with two other women. Their faces showed the same cold dismissal Temperance had seen in a dozen towns before. "Move along, half-breed. Nothing for you here." Temperance's jaw tightened, but she stepped back. This was how it always went. She would find supplies elsewhere, sleep under the stars, and leave these people to their small, bitter lives. At the blacksmith shop, hammer strikes rang against anvil in steady rhythm. The sound drew her attention to a massive figure working the forge. Sweat glistened on dark skin as powerful arms shaped glowing metal. The blacksmith's son looked up briefly, his gentle eyes meeting hers across the street. Unlike the others, he didn't look away in disgust. He simply nodded and returned to his work. Temperance gathered what few supplies she could from the reluctant shopkeepers. Each transaction came with insults barely disguised as conversation. The assumed fate hung over her like smoke from the forge. Another town that would reject her. Another night camping alone. Another morning riding toward an uncertain horizon. But as she prepared to leave, something changed everything. Near the town's edge, where the desert reclaimed the land, Temperance spotted a figure collapse beside a dried creek bed. She dismounted and rushed forward. An elderly Apache woman lay motionless, her lips cracked from thirst, her breathing shallow. Temperance didn't hesitate. She lifted the woman and carried her to shade, then retrieved her precious water supply. Drop by drop she helped the stranger drink. Hours passed as Temperance tended to her, using skills learned from her Apache grandmother. As evening approached, the woman's eyes fluttered open. She studied Temperance's face with surprising sharpness. "You saved my life, child." Anyone would have done the same. The Apache woman, who called herself Ayana, smiled knowingly. No, they would not. As Temperance helped Ayana sit up, the older woman's gaze wandered to the rock formations surrounding them. She noticed how Temperance's eyes lingered on the stone patterns, how her fingers traced certain mineral veins with understanding. "You read the stones." "Some." Temperance's voice grew cautious. "My son works the forge in town. His father left him puzzles before he died, maps and rocks that made no sense." Ayana's voice grew stronger with each word. Perhaps they would make sense to someone who reads the stones. That night, Ayana insisted Temperance share her small fire. As they talked, the older woman learned more about the young woman who had saved her. Temperance spoke little of her past, but her knowledge of geology and mining became clear. "The townspeople hate me," Temperance said quietly. "Your son won't want to meet with me. My son judges people by their actions, not their blood." Iana's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "And I heard something interesting today. You told the mayor you wanted directions to Copper Creek. That means you're looking for work." Temperance nodded. "Then I have a proposal. Stay one more day. Meet my son. Look at his father's puzzles." Iana leaned forward. "If you can solve them, it might change both your lives." The next morning brought fresh hostility from the townspeople. Martha Glenwood led a small group to Temperance's campsite, demanding she leave immediately. "Iana Crow Feather asked me to stay another day," Temperance replied calmly. The women exchanged uncertain glances. Iana was respected even by those who held prejudices against her people. Her word carried weight. "One day," Martha warned. "Then you're gone." But Iana had other plans. As the sun reached its peak, she approached Temperance with determination in her weathered features. "I heard you want a husband," she said, her voice carrying across the dusty ground. "My son is perfect for you." If you are enjoying this story of how an unexpected encounter will change two lives forever, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen in the next 15 minutes in Dry Gulch will completely change everything these characters thought they knew about their futures. Temperance stared at Iana in disbelief. The older woman's proposal hung in the air between them like desert heat. "I don't need a husband. I need to leave this town." Iana's weathered hands gripped Temperance's arm gently but firmly. "My son Ezekiel has been alone too long. His father died 3 years ago, left him mysteries he cannot solve." "What kind of mysteries?" "Come, see for yourself." Against her better judgment, Temperance followed Iana toward the blacksmith shop. The rhythmic hammer strikes grew louder as they approached. Through the open doorway, she could see the massive figure working at the forge. Ezekiel Thornfield stood nearly 7 feet tall, his broad shoulders moving with practiced precision. When he looked up and saw his mother approaching with the stranger, his expression shifted from concentration to confusion. "Mother, what brings you here with our visitor?" "Zeke, this is Temperance. She saved my life yesterday." Iana's voice carried a note of ceremony. "I want you to show her your father's collection." Zeke wiped his hands on his leather apron, uncertainty clouding his gentle features. "Mother, I don't think that's wise. Show her." The command in Iana's voice surprised both younger people. Zeke glanced at Temperance, taking in her travel-worn clothes and mixed heritage. Unlike the other townspeople, his gaze held no judgment, only caution. "Follow me." He led them to a back room where wooden crates lined the walls. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight as Zeke opened the first container. Inside lay dozens of rock samples, each carefully wrapped and labeled in faded handwriting. Temperance's breath caught. Her trained eye immediately recognized valuable mineral specimens. She picked up a piece of quartz streaked with silver veins. "Where did these come from?" "The mountains north of town. Father spent months up there before he died." Zeke opened another crate, revealing hand-drawn maps covered in symbols and notations. "He said he found something important, but he died before he could explain." Temperance studied the maps with growing excitement. The geological markers made perfect sense to her trained eye. Survey points, elevation notes, mineral concentrations. This wasn't the work of an amateur prospector. Your father was a geologist. He learned some during the California gold rush. But these symbols mean nothing to me. Temperance traced a finger along one of the drawn survey lines. Her heart raced as she recognized the geological formations. If these maps were accurate, they indicated something extraordinary. "I need to see these locations in person." Zeke hesitated. "The townspeople already want you gone. If they see us together in the mountains, it will make things worse." "For who?" "For both of us." But Iana stepped forward with a knowing smile. "Sometimes the right thing is also the difficult thing. Your father died protecting this secret. Perhaps it's time to understand why." That afternoon, Zeke closed his shop early. He and Temperance rode north toward the mountain formations marked on his father's maps. The first location proved to be exactly as documented. Temperance dismounted and examined the rock face with practiced skill. The silver veins were unmistakable, more extensive than anything she had seen in years of traveling. But as she studied the geological patterns, she realized this was just the beginning. Zeke, your father didn't just find silver. He found an entire lode system. What does that mean? It means these mountains contain enough precious metal to transform this entire region. Temperance turned to face him, her eyes bright with discovery. Your father found a fortune. They spent the remaining daylight visiting 3 more locations. Each site confirmed Temperance's growing assessment. The mineral wealth hidden in these mountains was staggering. As they rode back toward town, Zeke remained unusually quiet. Finally, he spoke. Why would my father keep this secret? The town is struggling. This could save everyone. Maybe he was protecting it from the wrong people. That evening, word of their mountain excursion spread through Dry Gulch like wildfire. Mayor Ashford appeared at Zeke's shop as the sun set, his face flushed with anger. What were you thinking, boy? Gallivanting around with that half-breed troublemaker. Zeke straightened to his full height, dwarfing the mayor. Her name is Temperance. She's helping me understand my father's work. Your father was a dreamer who died chasing fool's gold. Don't let her fill your head with the same nonsense. Martha Glenwood arrived with several other women, their faces set in hard lines of disapproval. This has gone far enough, Martha declared. That woman is corrupting our young men with wild stories and false hopes. What stories? Zeke asked quietly. Claims about treasure in the mountains. Silver deposits that will make everyone rich. Martha's voice dripped with scorn. The same lies that killed your father. But Temperance had remained silent long enough. She stepped forward, holding one of the mineral samples. This isn't fool's gold. This is high-grade silver ore. And you're an expert now. Ashford's voice carried mockery. I am. The simple statement hung in the air. Temperance reached into her saddlebag and withdrew a leather portfolio. Inside were certificates and letters of recommendation from mining operations across 3 territories. I've surveyed mineral deposits from Colorado to California. I know valuable ore when I see it. The crowd fell silent. Even Martha seemed taken aback by the documentation. Ashford recovered first, his voice turning sharp. Convenient papers for a drifter to carry. They're real, just like the silver in these mountains. The confrontation might have escalated, but Ayana appeared at Temperance's side. Her presence commanded respect even from those who harbored prejudices. My son's father died believing in something important. Perhaps it's time we learned what that was. The emergency town meeting was called for the following evening. Word spread quickly through Dry Gulch about the confrontation at the blacksmith shop. Opinions divided sharply between those curious about the mineral claims and those determined to run Temperance out of town. Temperance spent the morning preparing her geological survey. She spread Zeke's father's maps across his workshop table, comparing them with her own observations. Each calculation confirmed her initial assessment. The silver deposits were vast and accessible. Are you certain about this? Zeke asked, watching her work. I've staked my reputation on less promising sites. Temperance rolled up one of the completed surveys. Your father discovered something extraordinary. The question is why he kept it hidden. Martha Glenwood arrived at the shop before noon, her expression stern but less hostile than before. She studied the papers scattered across the table. You really believe there's silver up there? I don't believe it, I know it. Then, why hasn't anyone found it before? Temperance pointed to one of the survey markers on the map. Your town sits in a geological depression. The visible rock formations hide the valuable deposits. It takes specific knowledge to read the underlying structure. Martha's weathered face showed the first cracks in her skepticism. Behind her skepticism lay desperate hope. The town was dying slowly, losing families to more prosperous regions every month. If you're wrong, you'll have given people false hope. If I'm right, I'll have given them a future. That afternoon, Eastern developers arrived in town. 3 men in expensive suits stepped down from a well-appointed carriage, their presence immediately drawing attention. Mayor Ashford greeted them with nervous enthusiasm. The lead developer, a thin man with calculating eyes, surveyed the struggling town with obvious satisfaction. Low property values meant profitable acquisitions. Desperate sellers meant favorable terms. Temperance watched the interaction from across the street. Something about Ashford's demeanor troubled her. His nervousness seemed less about protecting his town and more about protecting his secrets. "They've been circling for months," Zeke observed, "making offers well below market value. And Ashford opposes them. Publicly, yes. But some folks wonder about his private meetings." Evening brought most of the town to the community hall. Oil lamps cast flickering shadows across worried faces as Mayor Ashford called the meeting to order. The developers sat in the front row, their presence adding tension to the already charged atmosphere. "We're here to discuss the wild claims being made by our unwelcome visitor," Ashford began. Temperance stood from her seat in the back. "I request permission to present my findings. You have no standing in this community." "She has my invitation," Yana called out. Several other voices murmured agreement. Reluctantly, Ashford gestured toward the front of the room. Temperance carried her survey materials forward, her calm confidence contrasting sharply with the hostile energy around her. "3 days ago, I examined the mountain formations north of town. Based on geological surveys and mineral samples, I've identified significant silver deposits." Martha stood abruptly. "And we're supposed to take the word of a drifter with fancy papers." The challenge hung in the air. This was the moment Temperance had prepared for her entire adult life. Everything depended on her ability to prove her worth to people determined to dismiss her. She reached into her leather portfolio and withdrew a letter bearing an official seal. "This is a commendation from the Colorado Territorial Mining Authority. I located the Silverton deposits that produced over $2 million in ore." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Even the developers leaned forward with sudden interest. "This certificate is from the California Geological Survey. I identified 3 major deposits that are still producing today." Temperance's voice grew stronger with each piece of evidence. "I learned geology from my Apache grandfather, who understood this land before surveyors ever arrived. I studied with Professor Williams at the Denver School of Mines until territorial laws banned mixed-race students." The room fell silent. Her credentials were undeniable. "I've traveled thousands of miles, helping communities discover the wealth beneath their feet. I know the difference between wishful thinking and geological reality." Temperance spread the survey map across the speaker's table. "These mountains contain the largest silver lode system I've ever documented." She pointed to specific locations, explaining the geological formations in terms the townspeople could understand. Her expertise was evident in every detail, from mineral composition to extraction methods. "The initial surveys suggest deposits worth millions of dollars, enough to transform this region into a major mining center." The developers exchanged urgent whispers. One stood quickly. "Miss, we represent investment interests from back east. If your claims prove accurate, we'd be interested in purchasing mining rights immediately." "The rights belong to the community," Temperance replied firmly. Mayor Ashford's face flushed red. "Now see here, you can't just waltz into our town and start making promises about community ownership." "I'm not making promises. I'm offering possibilities." Zeke stood from his seat, his massive frame commanding attention. "My father believed in these deposits enough to die for them. If Temperance says they're real, I believe her." "And what gives you the right to speak for this community?" Martha challenged. "The same right that gives her the knowledge to save it." The confrontation reached its peak as voices rose throughout the hall. Some demanded Temperance leave immediately. Others insisted she be given the chance to prove her claims. The developers pressed for immediate negotiations. Through it all, Temperance remained calm. She had faced hostile crowds before. Her reputation was built on moments like this, when expertise confronted prejudice and truth challenged assumption. "I'll make this simple," she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Give me 1 week to complete a full geological survey. If I'm wrong, I'll leave and never return. If I'm right, this community will control its own destiny for the first time in years." The room fell silent as the ultimatum settled over them. The town voted to give Temperance her week. The margin was narrow, but enough voices supported the chance at salvation over the certainty of decline. Mayor Ashford's objections were overruled by desperate hope. Temperance began her comprehensive survey at dawn the next morning. Zeke accompanied her, carrying equipment and learning to read the geological signs she pointed out. Their working relationship deepened into genuine partnership as they mapped the mountain formations. "Your father was methodical," Temperance observed, comparing his notes to her findings. "Every measurement is precise. He knew exactly what he'd found." "Then why didn't he tell anyone? Maybe he tried to tell the wrong person." By the third day, strange incidents began occurring. Survey stakes disappeared overnight. Equipment went missing from their campsite. Fresh horse tracks appeared where no riders should have been. Temperance found a crude warning carved into a tree near their main survey point. The message was clear: leave or face consequences. "Someone doesn't want us completing this survey," she told Zeke. "The developers, or someone working with them." That evening, they returned to town to find Mayor Ashford waiting at the blacksmith shop. His nervous energy had transformed into barely controlled agitation. "This foolishness has gone far enough. You're stirring up dangerous hopes." "Dangerous to whom?" Temperance asked. Ashford's face flushed. "To people who might make rash decisions based on false promises." But Zeke noticed something else in the mayor's manner. The way he avoided eye contact, the tremor in his hands, the sweat beading despite the cool evening air. "You know something about my father's death. Your father died in a mining accident, nothing more. He was an experienced prospector. He wouldn't make careless mistakes." Ashford turned to leave, but Zeke's massive frame blocked his path. "What really happened up there? Ask your half-breed friend. She seems to have all the answers." The slur hung in the air like poison. Temperance had heard worse, but coming from an elected official, it carried particular sting. "My expertise threatens you," she said quietly. "The question is why?" Ashford pushed past them without responding, but his reaction told them everything they needed to know. He was hiding something significant. The next morning brought Martha Glenwood to their campsite. She carried a basket of food and an expression of grudging respect. "Thought you might be hungry." Temperance accepted the offering with surprise. "Thank you. I've been thinking about what you said about community ownership." Martha settled onto a fallen log. "The developers have been pressuring everyone to sell, making it sound like our only option. It's not. But if there really is silver up here, why would they want our worthless land?" The question crystallized Temperance's growing suspicions. She spread out her survey maps showing Martha the geological formations. Somehow they know about the deposits. How is that possible? Someone told them. That afternoon, Zeke decided to investigate. He followed a hunch that had been growing for days, tracking the fresh horse trails that kept appearing near their survey sites. The trail led to an abandoned cabin in a remote canyon. Through a gap in the boarded windows, he saw Mayor Ashford meeting with the lead developer. Maps were spread across a makeshift table, the same geological formations Temperance had been documenting. Zeke crept closer, straining to hear their conversation. "The survey needs to stop," the developer was saying. "If she completes her work, the townspeople will never sell. I'm doing what I can, but she has supporters now. Then find another way to stop her." "What are you suggesting?" "Nothing permanent. Just something to encourage her departure." Zeke had heard enough. He backed away carefully, his mind racing with the implications. Ashford wasn't just failing to protect the town. He was actively betraying it. But the conversation revealed something even more disturbing. The developers possessed detailed knowledge of the mineral deposits, maps that looked suspiciously similar to his father's work. That evening, Zeke confronted Temperance with his discovery. Her face hardened as she processed the information. Your father's maps. Someone copied them before his death. Ashford, or someone working with him. They spent hours comparing the stolen intelligence with Zeke's father's original work. The similarities were unmistakable. Someone had been planning this acquisition for years. My father discovered their scheme, Zeke realized. That's why he hid the maps, and why they made sure he couldn't expose them. The implications sent chills through both of them. This wasn't just about money. It was about murder disguised as accident. The next day brought escalated harassment. Temperance's horse was spooked by firecrackers hidden in her feed bag. Survey equipment was sabotaged. Anonymous threats appeared wherever they worked. But the intimidation only strengthened Temperance's resolve. She had faced worse odds before. Her expertise had been questioned, dismissed, and attacked in a dozen different towns. Each time she had proven herself through careful work and undeniable results. They're getting desperate, she told Zeke. That means we're close to something they can't afford to lose. On the 6th day, Temperance completed her comprehensive survey. The results exceeded even her initial estimates. The mountain formations contained enough silver to sustain mining operations for decades. But as they prepared to return to town with the final documentation, they discovered their horses missing. Their water supplies had been contaminated. Someone wanted them stranded in the mountains. We walk, Temperance decided. They won't stop us from reaching that town meeting. Zeke gathered their essential supplies and survey materials. The trek down the mountain would take hours, but they had no choice. As they descended toward Dry Gulch, smoke began rising from the direction of town. Something was burning. Their pace quickened as the implications became clear. The final confrontation was beginning whether they were ready or not. The smoke rose from the community hall where the final town meeting was scheduled to take place. Temperance and Zeke arrived to find Mayor Ashford addressing a crowd gathered in the street. Unfortunately, our meeting place has suffered damage from an accidental fire, Ashford announced. Perhaps we should postpone this geological presentation indefinitely. But Martha Glenwood stepped forward with determination. We'll meet in the church. This has been postponed long enough. The crowd moved toward the small wooden church at the town center. Temperance noticed how the developers lingered near Ashford, their expressions tense with barely concealed anxiety. Inside the church, oil lamps cast dancing shadows across worried faces. The week of waiting had divided the community into clear factions. Some looked at Temperance with hope, others with suspicion, all with desperate need for answers. Ashford called for order. Before we hear these supposed findings, I have serious concerns about our visitor's credentials. He produced a telegram from his vest pocket. This message from the Colorado Territorial Authority raises questions about Miss Blackwood's previous work. Temperance's heart sank. She had expected sabotage of her equipment, but not attacks on her professional reputation. The telegram states that several of her mining assessments proved inaccurate, costing investors substantial sums. Murmurs of doubt rippled through the congregation. Temperance stood slowly, her mind racing. The telegram was obviously forged, but proving that would be difficult. May I see this document? Ashford hesitated before handing it over. Temperance studied the paper carefully, noting inconsistencies in the letterhead and phrasing that no territorial official would use. But before she could respond, Zeke rose to his feet. His massive frame commanded immediate attention. Mayor Ashford, where were you 3 nights ago around sunset? I beg your pardon. Simple question. Where were you? Ashford's face flushed. I don't see how that's relevant to these proceedings. It's relevant because I saw you meeting with these developers in the old canyon cabin. Zeke's voice carried clearly to every corner of the church, discussing how to stop Temperance from completing her survey. The accusation electrified the room. The lead developer started to protest, but Zeke continued. You had maps, detailed geological surveys that looked exactly like my father's work. That's preposterous, Ashford sputtered. But Ayanna stood from her pew, her weathered face grave with understanding. Samuel Thornfield came to see me before he died, said he discovered something important but couldn't trust certain people in town. He never mentioned any names, Martha added, but he seemed frightened of someone he'd considered a friend. Temperance saw her opportunity. She moved to the front of the church and spread her completed survey across the altar. These mountains contain the largest silver deposits I've ever documented. Conservative estimates suggest over $5 million in easily accessible ore. Gasps echoed through the congregation. Even the skeptics leaned forward to examine her detailed maps. But someone has known about these deposits for years. Someone who's been working with Eastern developers to acquire this land at fraction of its real value. She pointed to specific geological markers on her survey. These locations match Samuel Thornfield's original discoveries, the same discoveries that certain people wanted kept secret. The lead developer stood abruptly. These are serious accusations without proof. The proof is in your possession of information that only Samuel had documented. Temperance reached into her portfolio and withdrew a second set of papers. These are copies of the original maps, hidden by Samuel before his death. Maps that show identical survey points to the ones you discussed with Mayor Ashford. The church fell silent as the implications sank in. Zeke had provided Temperance with the crucial evidence during their mountain descent. Martha Glenwood's voice cut through the quiet. Samuel died because he discovered your scheme. That's a baseless accusation, Ashford protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Temperance challenged. An experienced prospector dies in a convenient accident just before exposing a conspiracy to steal millions from his community. The developers began gathering their materials, sensing the mood shifting against them. But the townspeople blocked the church exits. No one was leaving until all questions were answered. You've been sabotaging my survey all week, Temperance continued. Stealing equipment, moving survey stakes, threatening violence. All to prevent this community from learning the truth about their own land. Jana's voice carried the weight of years. My son Zeke's father was a good man who believed in protecting his neighbors. Someone killed him for that belief. The moral authority in her words struck the congregation like lightning. Even Ashford's supporters began distancing themselves from his position. Martha stepped forward with papers of her own. These are the purchase offers we've all received. Identical contracts promising immediate payment for land worth 50 times more than they're offering. Legal documents, the developer insisted. Legal theft, Martha replied. Temperance seized the moment to present her complete findings. She explained how the geological formations concealed vast wealth, how proper mining operations could support the community for generations, how cooperative ownership would ensure everyone benefited from the discovery. Samuel Thornfield died protecting your future, she concluded. Don't let his sacrifice be wasted on the greed of men who see you as obstacles to their profit. The vote was unanimous. The developers were ordered to leave town immediately. Mayor Ashford was stripped of his authority pending a full investigation. But most importantly, the community embraced Temperance as their geological consultant and advocate. The woman they had tried to run out of town had become their salvation. As the crowd dispersed, Martha approached Temperance with tears in her eyes. I owe you an apology. We all do. You owe me nothing. You gave me something more valuable than money. What's that? A home. 6 months later, Dry Gulch bore little resemblance to the struggling frontier town Temperance had first entered. New buildings lined the main street. Fresh paint brightened weathered storefronts. The sound of construction mingled with the steady rhythm of mining operations in the distant mountains. Temperance stood on the porch of her new geological consulting office, watching the morning bustle with quiet satisfaction. Her official sign read Blackwood Mining Consultancy, in bold letters that commanded respect from everyone who passed. The silver deposits had proven even richer than her initial surveys suggested. The community-owned mining cooperative was producing steady profits that benefited every resident. Property values had increased tenfold, but no one was selling to outside developers anymore. Zeke emerged from his expanded blacksmith shop across the street. His business had grown to include specialized mining equipment and employed 3 additional workers. He waved to Temperance before heading toward the church where wedding preparations were underway. Their relationship had evolved naturally from professional partnership to deep personal connection. The shared challenges of those first weeks had forged a bond stronger than either had expected. Today marked their wedding day, blessed by both Apache and Christian traditions. Martha Glenwood arrived at the consulting office carrying a basket of flowers. Her transformation from hostile opponent to devoted friend represented the broader change in community attitudes. "The church looks beautiful," Martha reported. "Ayanna has outdone herself with the decorations. She insisted on handling everything herself. That woman has been planning this wedding since the day she suggested you meet Zeke." Martha's smile held genuine warmth. "I think she saw something the rest of us missed." The Apache woman's matchmaking had indeed proven prophetic. What began as desperate gratitude had revealed itself as shrewd wisdom. Yana had recognized compatibility that transcended surface differences. Later that morning, Temperance visited the small cemetery outside town. Samuel Thornfield's grave now bore a proper headstone, paid for by the mining cooperative. She placed fresh wildflowers on the marker. "Your son is happy," she whispered to the weathered stone. "The secret you died protecting has saved everyone you loved." The investigation into Samuel's death had revealed the full extent of the conspiracy. Mayor Ashford was serving time in territorial prison. The developers had been prosecuted for fraud and attempted murder. Justice had finally been served. Gianna appeared beside Temperance at the gravesite. The older woman's face showed peaceful satisfaction as she studied her son's father's memorial. "He would be proud of what you've accomplished. What we've all accomplished." "No, child, you were the catalyst. Without your expertise and courage, Samuel's sacrifice would have been meaningless." They walked back toward town together, past mining operations that hummed with productive activity. The cooperative employed nearly every able-bodied adult in the region. Families that had been preparing to abandon their homes were now building additions and planning for the future. The wedding ceremony began at sunset. The small church overflowed with well-wishers representing the entire community. Apache traditions blended seamlessly with Christian customs, creating something uniquely beautiful. Temperance wore a simple white dress, enhanced with traditional Apache jewelry that had belonged to Ayanna's grandmother. Zeke stood at the altar in his finest suit, his gentle smile radiating contentment. Martha served as matron of honor, her presence symbolizing complete acceptance and friendship. The woman who had once led efforts to expel Temperance now stood proudly beside her as family. The ceremony itself was conducted by both the town's minister and an Apache elder who had traveled from Ayanna's ancestral community. Two cultures united in celebration of love that transcended all boundaries. As they exchanged vows, Temperance reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From rejected outsider to beloved community leader, from lonely wanderer to cherished partner, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. "You saved us all," Zeke whispered during their first dance as husband and wife. "We saved each other." The reception continued long into the night. Stories were shared about the dramatic events that had changed everyone's lives. Toasts honored Samuel's memory and celebrated the community's bright future. But the most touching moment came when Ayanna stood to address the gathering. Her weathered face glowed with satisfaction as she surveyed the crowded room. "6 months ago, this young woman rode into our town seeking only supplies and directions. We saw a stranger to be feared and rejected." Her voice carried clearly to every corner. She saw neighbors who needed help and hope. The room fell silent as Ayanna's words sank in. Many faces showed shame for their initial treatment of Temperance. "Today we celebrate not just a wedding, but a transformation. We learned that worth is measured by character, not appearance. That wisdom comes in many forms. That love recognizes no boundaries. Applause filled the church as Ayanna raised her glass. To Temperance and Zeke, may your partnership continue to inspire us all. Later, as the celebration wound down, Temperance and Ayanna sat together on the church steps. The older woman's eyes twinkled with the satisfaction of a successful matchmaker. "You planned this from the beginning," Temperance accused gently. "I recognized potential when I saw it, both in you and in the situation. What if your plan had failed?" "It couldn't fail. Some connections are written in the stars." Yanna's smile held ancient wisdom. "I simply helped the stars align." The mining town of Dry Gulch continued to prosper under Temperance's guidance. Her consulting firm attracted clients from across the territory. The community became a model of cooperation and racial harmony that inspired neighboring settlements. Years later, when visitors asked about the town's remarkable transformation, residents would always tell the same story. About the wandering geologist who arrived as an unwelcome stranger and stayed to become their salvation. About the gentle blacksmith who found love and purpose through his father's legacy. About the wise Apache woman who saw possibilities where others saw only problems. Most importantly, they would speak of the day they learned to judge people by their contributions rather than their appearance. The day a community chose hope over fear, wisdom over prejudice, and love over division.